Good evening, everyone. So good to see you. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. So here where I am, on the land of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. I know some of you are on the land of other nations. So if so, please feel free to put their names in the chat. Always, but especially during these days, let's remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations, and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. So it's so good to have you all with us. Thank you so much. This is our second session. And now over to you, Harold. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy. Good to see everyone again. Okay. Yes, I just want to remind you quickly of some of the things we touched on last week, and then I'll go into introducing this week. And I'd like to talk maybe 30, 35 minutes, then sort of give you a chance to respond to what you're hearing, any new insights or observations or ways that you might put things differently. I try to be an interfaith diplomat and try to describe the phenomena of world religions as well as near-death experience research and scientific outlooks in a way that's more or less harmonious. I'm not insisting everyone make the same interpretations I do, but I try to figure out the common reality behind the belief claims and teachings of major traditions. So last time we introduced the whole topic, and I showed you a chart of 4 levels of reality that I'm going to revisit today with some different terms. Last time I mentioned we're going to end up looking at 15 different perspectives in this course at least, and including any other ones that you might bring to it. We looked specifically at near-death experience research and brain consciousness research and some native traditions having to do with levels of reality and the journey of the soul at different levels. Some of the terms, regarding the 4 levels chart, and I keep using that chart because I think it helps integrate the world religious perspectives and even scientific perspectives. But at the bottom of the 4-level chart, it says evolving physical levels of being, like the mineral world, the plant world, the animal world, and the human world. It's almost as if the divine maker gave us a lot of experience with levels. So the ordinary human education that we get all over the world teaches us about the mineral realm, and on top of that, or a little higher, the plant realm, and on top of that, or a little higher, the animal realm, and then the human realm. So even before we have any religious instruction, or guidance, we are experiencing and looking at 4 realms of reality. And even those 4 realms, of course, have sub-levels. Okay, and so a study like a comparative religious study of the afterlife introduces the realm that I call the afterlife realm, which is named in different ways and has different sub-levels. Then something like the revelatory realm, or the realm from which divine educators or prophets or avatars or enlightened beings come to us. And then the highest realm of all, called the divine realm or ultimate reality. Okay, so I just want to remind you, last week we introduced some of the First Nations terms for these levels. And I talked about the breath soul and the free soul that are part of the earthly realm. And then the term all my relations, which refers to the afterlife realm, but also is big enough to include the realm we're living in. And then higher than that, the revelatory realm, there are indigenous people believe in prophets as well, special holy persons that seem to, be in touch with the Great Spirit. And so spirit beings, indigenous prophets, and a figure called the transformer is in that revelatory realm, according to indigenous people. And then the divine realm has terms like the Great Spirit, or the Creator, or the Supreme Ancestor, or the Great Mystery. So all of that is just to say that the peoples of the world and the different spiritual traditions name the levels of reality differently. Last week, I also mentioned some terms that come out of the near-death experience reports, like the being of light, That would be the name for the divine realm. From that point of view, a scientific term for the revelatory realm could be the implicate order, as used by David Bohm. And then, the mind is an important link between the human realm and higher realms. Okay, so that's just to remind you of a little bit of what we touched on last week. So this week, we turn to three more big topics: Hindu views of the afterlife, Buddhist views, and Sikh views. So these are the worldviews that come out of South Asia or India. And there's some family resemblances among them, as we'll see. Not only family resemblances among them, but among those three traditions and the ones we've talked about already and the ones we'll talk about in future sessions as well. So this month, or right now, we're looking at the religions of India, and next week we'll look at the religions of East Asia: Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism. Okay, and every time I'm going to use this chart, the 4 levels chart, because it's my way of sort of saying humanity as a whole, from different religious and philosophical perspectives, is referring to levels of reality. They name them differently, but it doesn't necessarily mean they understand them differently. So that's one of my hypotheses, that there's a great deal of harmony or complementarity between the different worldviews in terms of the afterlife. And also the main purpose of this course, at least from my point of view, is studying the afterlife clarifies moral spiritual capacity in this life, or it's an excuse to evaluate how are we doing. Are we ready to go on to higher realms? How does our life look from the point of view of a higher level of being, right? It's like looking at ourselves with God's eye view, so to speak. Okay, so that catches us up with today. Now, I would like to, I've sent you the 4 realms chart again, and I think each month I'll send you it again, and I'm going to keep adding some terms to it. So at the bottom level, the earthly realm, I'm just going to share with you some Hindu terms for how that realm is described. One term is karma. Karma means the realm of action or results. So the earthly realm is full of karma, for better and for worse. Another very important term from the Hindu perspective is samsara, meaning the world of struggle, the world of wandering, the world of change. Those are Hindu terms. Here's another Hindu term, the Atman. The Atman is sort of the divine within. You might think of it as the soul with a capital S. So it's our spiritual agent that is open to higher levels of reality. We have access to higher levels through the Atman, or the inner spirit. Okay, those are some Hindu terms. Some Buddhist terms for the earthly realm would also include karma. Buddhism is a sister religion to Hinduism. It uses the term karma and samsara also. And the term inner observer is one translation of some Buddhist writings, that there's a part of us that watches what's going on inside and watches what's going on outside. And by virtue of our inner observer or agent of awareness, we can be compassionate for others' pain, and we can make moral and spiritual progress through the inner observer. Okay, I'm going up to the afterlife realm. Some terms used by Hindus to describe that realm include moksha. Moksha means release or spiritual liberation. So in effect, moksha means graduating from this realm of samsara, or struggle and wandering, graduating into spiritual release. The world of Yama is another term Hindus use. Yama is the Lord of Death. So the world of Yama would be the afterlife world. for better and for worse. There's also terms that mean heaven and hell from the Hindu perspective. Vaikuntha means Vishnu's paradise, and Naraka is another term for hell in the Hindu perspective. Some Buddhist perspectives for what we're calling the afterlife realm include nirvana. However, nirvana is experienceable to some degree in this life. So if it means the extinction or the end of suffering or attachment, we get glimpses of nirvana here, but it's also a term almost synonymous with heaven, that we can graduate into nirvana. And that's in fact the goal of life. Another term, Sukhavati, means pure land. We'll talk more about that later. It's a Hindu term. And the realm of hungry ghosts is an intriguing Buddhist term. In fact, we're going to look at something called the 6 afterlife realms in Buddhist literature. The godlike, small g, angel-like, human-like, animal-like, ghost-like, and hell-like. 6 afterlife realms. So both Hinduism and Buddhism offer some very rich, complex ideas about levels of reality. I want to just give you one term for the earthly realm, going back to the earthly realm from the Sikh perspective. There's a term manmukh, which means the realm of desire or the realm of egoism or impulse. So they're saying that the human existence is full of those kinds of considerations. We're pushed around by our needs and our wants. They call it manmukh. The Sikh term for the afterlife realm is mukti. It sounds like moksha, doesn't it? It means the same thing, spiritual release. Or sahaj is another term, means spiritual liberation or the goal of life. So the goal of this life is to reach sahaj or mukti or release in the higher realms from a Sikh perspective. Okay, I'm jumping up to 2 more levels now, and then we'll be done with the chart for tonight. The revelatory realm, from this Hindu point of view, you could use words like avatars or the word dharma. Dharma means something like the realm of law, the path of truth. Avatars include figures like Krishna from the Hindu perspective. From the Buddhist perspective, they might use the term enlightened ones, special figures like Gautama Buddha, who came to this world. The path of truth is a Buddhist term for what I'm calling the revelatory realm. The Sikh terms for this realm might be hukam, meaning the source of all order in the universe, the source of order, the ordering force, and also the idea of a divine guru, a figure like Nanak, is believed to have come from that realm to the earthly realm to be an educator and a teacher. Okay, and finally, the divine realm, moving up higher. Hinduism has this incredible thing called Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, meaning God as the creator, God as the sustainer, and God as the transforming force. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva point to ultimate reality. And I think some similar terms in Buddhism might be the transcendent realm, the unconditioned realm, parinirvana, or nirvana that's even higher than the realm that we aspire to go to. Dharmakaya means something like the truth body or the body of truth itself. It's a very exalted term in Buddhism. And the formless realm, too, is a Buddhist term translated into English, the realm beyond form, from which all forms come. And finally, some Sikh terms, the one supreme being, Ik Ankar, means the one supreme being, or the true name of God, Sat Nam. It's a Buddhist term, or excuse me, a Sikh term for the highest reality. Okay, friends, I hope that wasn't confusing. It's trying to say that the different religions use different terms for what appear to be levels of reality, 4 levels of reality. And so this course as a whole is looking at the afterlife realm, which is higher than the earthly realm and lower than the other 2 spiritual realms that we're describing. Could be called revelatory or divine or ultimate realms. Okay, for better or worse, I'm going to try to do this again next week, or next session, a month from now, using Chinese terms. There are Confucian and Taoist terms for these levels of reality as well, and Shinto too. Okay, friends, now I'm looking at the second session, the main handout, 6 pages. And I'm not going to try to cover everything. I'm just going to allude to some parts of it. And I want to get through the Hindu section and then stop and give you a chance to respond with questions, comments. If something's unclear, you can also just plain disagree with what you're hearing. So I'm interpreting. We have to interpret when we study world religions. There's an infinite amount to know on any one of them. And if we're talking about all of them together and comparing them, we have to sort of be interpreting how the main teachings relate to each other. And I have a harmonizing point of view. I'm sort of saying, I think they're more similar than people realize. What humanity is being taught about the higher realms is quite similar, I believe, in all the religions, but the vocabulary and the images, the metaphors used are very different. The messages came to humanity, across the ages, sometimes 500 to 1,000 years apart from each other in different parts of the world. So we're looking at cultural images associated with higher realities. Okay, in the notes on Hinduism, I mentioned that Krishna is a very important figure in Hinduism because he's the main character in the Mahabharata, which is an 18-volume book, a set of books about ancient India with lots of moral spiritual guidance in it. The Bhagavad Gita is a small part of the Mahabharata, but it's, I think, the most important part of it in the sense that it's the essence of Hindu teachings coming right through from Krishna talking to his one of his main disciples. And Hinduism, of course, has the 4 yogas. It has many sacred writings. I mentioned right at the top 2 big concepts. Brahman Atman means the ultimate that is beyond and the ultimate that is within. So that's a powerful concept in Hinduism. The beyond is within. And it's also beyond us too. And the avatar is this figure who comes from the higher realms and spends time on earth in a certain historical period, teaching us, divine knowledge and moral spiritual concepts. Okay, so the avatar, 3 of them are well recognized in Hindu literature. Rama was an early one about the time of Abraham. Krishna was about 600 years later. And
Moses.
then Buddha is also called an avatar to Hindus. To me, this is fascinating. So it's one major religion, the Hindu faith, recognizing the founder of another faith, Buddhism, to be a very special figure, an avatar. Okay. Now, in the middle, 2/3 of the way down on the first handout, I mentioned rebirth or samsara. So this is human existence as usual. It's full of wandering consciousness and lack of fulfillment and frustration. So this is a term. Samsara means the cycle of ups and downs, the cycle of of being born, dying, and then being born again. And all of that is considered wearisome, very difficult. Okay, and reincarnation is the belief in Hinduism that the soul can wander from this life and then back into this life again in another body. We're going to look at that because I think that the scriptures of Hinduism say something a little bit different than physical reincarnation. They talk about rebirth, but it might be a more spiritual process of moving through the realms. We'll look at that. We're going to study some writings in Hindu tradition. Again, the goal of life from a Hindu perspective is moksha, that is releasing the spirit from this realm of suffering. That would be going to a higher realm and there gaining in our consciousness in a very expansive way and having immortal life, making progress in a higher realm. Okay. Yama, the word Yama is the name for the Lord of Death. If you sneak up to somebody from an East Indian background and say Yama, see, it really is a scary concept. It's
Don't do it.
Oh, yeah, don't do that. So I think, you know, the idea of the Grim Reaper.
Mhm.
So the idea of death with a big sword that's going to cut you off from this life. The Lord of Death kind of has that reputation. However, it's larger than that because the realm of death has positive and negative things. We want to graduate into it at the higher realms, but we might get there prematurely and have to come back. That's sort of the fear. Okay, I'm looking at page 2 of my notes, and it says here, the reincarnation controversy, Hindu aspects. You know, when I call it a controversy, I'm talking from my point of view. I'm trying to harmonize beliefs across different traditions. And if I interpret reincarnation not literally, but figuratively, I feel like you can account better for the ways in which Hindu, Buddhist beliefs do not contradict, say, Jewish, Christian, Islamic beliefs. If you look at reincarnation as rebirth, and which is symbolic of progress in higher realms. But if you say the soul comes back to another body, that's actually contradictory to what the Western religions say. I also believe, and this is what I think I've found, there are quotes in the Hindu writings and in the Buddhist writings that imply that the soul or spirit or the higher inner observer of human beings does go up, does go to higher levels and makes sort of like infinite progress without having to come back. The coming back is almost like a threat. If you fail to graduate from this realm, you will come back. That is supposed to motivate you to develop more compassion for other people, to engage in more strict kinds of moral spiritual disciplines, to improve your yoga and that sort of thing. Okay. Again, I'm interpreting. I want to show you some of the writings. At the bottom of page 2 and on to page 3, there are some things from Hindu scriptures. We'll read some of these, and then I'll stop and ask for comments and questions, and we'll talk a while, and then I'll go back and we'll do the same thing with Buddhism and Sikhism, and then leave time at the end for more discussion about everything. Okay, so let's first look at some of these scriptural teachings from Hindu sources. Near the bottom of my second page, there's number 4. And Kathy, I'm wondering if you can read that passage number 4, bottom of page 2.
Yes.
That comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Can you read that? Yeah.
Yes. They say, just as the dweller in the body has the stage of childhood, of youth, and of old age, following the same pattern, he attains different forms and stages in his spiritual development. The wise are not deluded by these changes.
So that seems to be saying something about the development of the soul, right? Just like we develop in this physical world, from childhood to adolescence to adulthood to the elder years, the soul keeps on evolving and developing. It's sort of saying something like that. And it says the wise are not deluded by these changes. Okay, so there are changes that are spiritual as well as changes that are physical. Okay, anyone else willing to read? I'll call on people. You can always say, I'll pass. Richard, could you read number 6?
I didn't print it. I could
Oh,
my
not
computer.
able to do it. Okay.
I'm naughty.
Yeah, that's all right. You just have to take our word for what we're looking at.
Yeah, well,
Okay, Dorothy, can you read? No?
I don't know why, but I don't seem to have those pages. I've got something you handed out last time, but I don't have anything that you're referring to
we sent
now.
out a new email, which I didn't.
Yeah, Kathy's each month, Kathy's going to send you another handout, and we're hoping you'll print it up.
Oh, what?
Get it printed and hold it so you can read it, and so we can all look at each other's faces
Oh.
rather than screen share.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's all right.
That's
Is
okay.
anyone
I'll
else willing
resend.
to read? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Belinda is. And I'll
Belinda.
resend it to you, Dorothy.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Linda, you're muted though.
So now I'm unmuted. Okay, I've got it here. I've also got another translation at hand here.
Oh, don't confuse us with another translation.
Okay, actually, it's a very clear one, but we'll read this one. All those who take refuge in me, Krishna, whatever their birth, race, sex, or caste, will attain the supreme goal, moksha. This realization of the supreme goal can be attained even by those whom society scorns.
The reason I gave you this one, this is extremely important, I believe.
Is
Wow. It's saying everyone can reach the supreme goal, even the untouchables, even the lowest caste. In fact, if this is taken seriously, it would wipe out the caste system. It's sort of saying those differences are not morally and spiritually important because everyone can make progress. Everyone can get to the supreme goal. The supreme goal would not be coming back, and being reincarnated. See, I'm interpreting the basic thrust of the Hindu faith as saying we are to experience advancement in higher realms, the supreme goal. And everyone has the potential to do this. Okay, now here's the most controversial one, number 7, right below it. Anyone else willing to read and able to read having the copy? Okay, Kathy, we're back to you.
Okay, no problem.
Number 7 from
As
the
a
Bhagavad
man-
Gita. Yeah.
As a man casting off worn out garments takes on other new ones, likewise the embodied souls casting off worn out bodies go on to others that are new. Weapons cannot cut these new garments, nor can fire burn them. Water cannot drench them, nor can wind make them dry.
So Kathy, I'm going to pick on you for this. What do they mean there when they say go on to others that are new? In the second line, it says,
Go on to other bodies, it sounds like.
it
So-
sounds like.
It sounds like,
What if it meant other garments? In other words, packagings of the bodies. You see, in fact, the next sentence suggests that that's what they're really referring to. It says, weapons cannot cut these new garments. Right? Okay, and it says, why not? It says, nor can fire burn them, water cannot drench them, nor can wind make them dry. So these garments are spiritual garments beyond our perfect understanding because they're in a higher realm. They're using words we recognize, but to elevate our understanding. So if we look at this again, as a man casting off worn off garments takes on other new ones, likewise, the embodied souls casting off worn out bodies go on to others that are new. The others, I think, means other garments that are new. So we go through higher levels, is what I think it's saying. And we should advance under the proper conditions. We will advance morally and spiritually and take on other forms in higher realms. It implies higher because the weapons cannot cut these new garments. They're uncuttable, right? Nor can fire burn them. They're at a higher level of existence. Water cannot drench them, nor wind make them dry. They're figurative, symbolic, or spiritual garments or forms that we take as we advance. I'm interpreting. I think this is what this is saying. Yet, many people have said, oh, this means you come back to other bodies. The second sentence here convinces me it's talking about we should go on to a realm where those new garments are very different. They're spiritual garments. They can't be cut or made wet. Okay, let's look at the next page. Has two more quotes that I'd like us to look at. Number 10 is in a part of the Mahabharata that's devoted to teachings about the afterlife. It's called the Ascent to Paradise. Okay, Belinda, would you be willing to read number 10?
Yeah, just give me a minute to locate it. Number 10, the fortunate ones are born over there with their share of happiness. If one does not conscientiously do his duty over here, then he goes to the abject evil condition over there. Whatever actions are done in this world, the same are reaped in that world. The divine view is this. This is the action world, and that is the fruit world.
This is the action world, and that is the fruit world. So whatever we do here results in some positive or negative consequences in that higher realm. That's what I think it's saying, right? And it's not saying we come back to this world and take on another body, although I admit people have interpreted that way down through the ages. Okay, there's one more quote I want to look at, and then say one more thing about reincarnation, and then open it up to discussion for a while, and then move on to Buddhism. There's something called the Upanishads, very deep spiritual literature that's about 2,800 years old. Kathy, can you read 13?
Yes.
Number
At the very beginning, the embryo is generated, that brilliant quintessence of all his body limbs, conceived in the woman, that is the very first birth. A nourishing woman gives birth, and she also enhances its progress after that. That is his second birth. The soul performs his duties, and having lived his life, journeys away from here forever. That is his third birth.
So, this is describing three births, or rebirth, you might say. The first birth sounds like something like conception, in the womb of the woman. The second birth is what we would call birth, coming out of the womb into this world. And then the third birth referred to seems to be leaving this realm forever and going into other realms. So, that's an interpretation of this. Again, it looks like reincarnation would be going backwards, in a sense. Here's one more thing I want to point out. I'm a student of history as well. There was a time in Indian civilization, like around 1,500 years ago, where beliefs, this was after the Gupta Empire. The Gupta Empire was very, very advanced in India. All kinds of wonderful things happened in the Gupta Empire, but maybe more like around 600 or 700 of the Common Era. Beliefs in reincarnation were so, you might say, strict. Like, for example, if you saw someone drowning in a river, you would say, oh, that they're suffering their karma from another life. So I'm not going to rescue them, even though I feel like I should. I'm not going to, because that's interfering with their karma. So if a lot of people believe that all the evils in the world, the injustices, the suffering, is because of karma in another life, then you don't want to solve those problems. So anyway, so I'm saying taking reincarnation very seriously and dogmatically almost makes you not want to interfere with social conditions, because then you would have the belief everyone is suffering, is getting the direct result of their karma in a previous life. I shouldn't interfere. Okay. To me, that's a formula for a decay of civilization. And in fact, I believe Indian civilization declined from about 650, 700 up until Sikhism brought about a reformation, you might say, right? There were some great things that happened. I don't want to say nothing happened in Hinduism. There were some great thinkers that came along, but generally Hindu civilization declined and started to have kind of new input by the Sikhs and the Muslims right around 1500. It was kind of an era of reformation, almost like a renaissance. So I think Indian civilization began to wake up around that time again because of other influences, right? Because they had gotten a little stale in some of their social justice teachings. That's a theory of mine, only a theory, not absolute truth. Okay. I called this the reincarnation controversy because people have different views about it, and I'm trying desperately to sort of be a missing link between Eastern and Western perspectives and do what I can to interpret it so that the levels of reality, the teachings correspond with each other a little more. Harold the harmonizer, maybe Harold the distorter. Okay, any comments, questions so far? What's your experience with Hindu teachings, yoga, meditation? Gandhi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Harold, I have a few things to say here.
Please.
If you could put in the chat or an email, who is your translator for the Gita?
Oh, okay. I'll look that up. I don't want to take time now. Yeah,
No, you don't have
you and
to
I
tell
will
me
have
now.
an
That's
email
something I'd
chat
like
about
to
that.
know.
Okay, yeah.
I think one of your attributions may be in error, because I tried to look it up in my copy of the Gita and it didn't match. And the one
You
I'm
mean
looking
different
at,
translations are different in the scriptures? Oh my good. Yes, that's a problem, isn't it? Okay, you and I will chat though. We'll chat. Same thing with the Bible. Even the Quran, when it gets into other languages, starts to sound a tiny bit different.
I'm talking about, it's more than a translation difference. I think the attribution of the verse and the book may be off because what I saw in my book was so different.
Oh, you mean even the numbering system is different? Yeah.
It might be. Okay, so that's a question. But anyhow, if I want to look it up, and I have more than one translation at hand, I will send you a good translation name for the Upanishads. I have the book, I can't find it, but I know the name of the author. Anyway, that's another thing. Now, there was something else. Among other things, before the year 1500, India, like much of the Middle East and the world in general of that time, had been very much impacted by the Mongol invasions and the Mongol empires.
You're right.
And India hit the edge of what they could do, partly because in India, the climate was different. Their bows didn't work so well. And then, of course, along there at some point, the Chinese invention of gunpowder got to India, and other places and was turned into, from a beautiful explosion, turned into a weaponized explosion, as we all know. Anyway, that's just another commentary there. I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, no,
Thank
fine. But, you know, it's interesting. When I try to teach civilizations courses, you know, there's this idea of guns, germs, and steel. You can
Oh,
account
yes.
for changes by looking at technology, weather, disease, all those factors. What I try to do is look for sort of spiritual, cultural dimensions to why
Oh, well-
civilizations advance or why they decline. I'm not saying that's the only factor. I'm just saying it's a big one. It's a very
Here's a
big
big
one.
one then.
Yeah.
The Mongol invasions, the Mongol Empire started because somebody, what was his name, Genghis Khan, thought he had a mandate from heaven to make the world safe for pastoral nomadic people.
Okay,
And,
I know.
yeah.
I just saw a series on TV about Kublai Khan. Very interesting. Okay,
Oh,
any
yeah.
other- yeah, I don't want to get too distracted with history.
No, we don't.
In this
But-
course, we're looking at
There was a
ideas.
mandate from heaven involved there.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Anything else? Hey, Richard, I think I see your hand up. Yeah.
One comment, and that is drawn from your quote with regard to the clothing. What occurred to me there is if you come back as a worm or as a bug, there are no clothes involved. And if you're talking about the clothing being on the body, then it definitely has to be something other than another meaning. In other words, the idea that a human body goes away and comes back as a bug or a worm because he was nasty, then where does this idea of the clothing in the next stage not being able to be burned fit in? It has no relevance anymore. So that's what makes me think it has to be abstract rather than literal.
Abstract rather than literal. I came to the same conclusion. But you know, you could say that the worm's body is, or the flesh of the worm is this new garment. I mean, some people might think of it that you know. Anyway, so however, you and I came to the same conclusion that they're talking about higher realms or a more abstract body or garment that goes around the soul or the spirit. Okay, other comments so far, observations?
I just wanted to make a
Yeah,
Oh,
please,
I'm
Kathy. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to comment about reincarnation when you said kind of how folks would take it in the worst possible way, which is like, oh, we shouldn't even help the people who are suffering
Yes,
because
yeah.
of past karma. And that's a totally valid critique. I know that's something, and it comes up in Buddhism, that same concern that then people won't do anything to change anything because it all must be for a reason. And just how it strikes me that almost any belief, you can take it in a really positive way or a negative way. So like the positive idea of reincarnation is that all creatures have been our mother in a past life. So we have to care for even small bugs and all creatures, which is like a really good way to go. Or in this really negative way where I'm not even going to help people who are in dire need because it must be their fault that they're suffering. So it's just interesting how we can take things in these different
Kathy,
ways, right?
that's brilliant. You know, to me, you're casting light on all my relations. As I understand it, that's a belief that you're in the family of all beings. You know, those at the so-called lower levels or higher levels, they're all part of your family. You're in the family of the Great Spirit. So, and you have some responsibility to care for them because they're members of your family. Now, that's an interesting, yeah, you're right, that you can take almost any belief and run with it in positive and negative or exclusive or inclusive directions, right? So that's why we need interfaith dialogue and interconceptual dialogue as well. I think I see Sue Bright with us and other people. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Harold. Sorry, I was listening to you as I was driving home from work in the car. So I've heard you right from the get-go. I'm now here with Elsie Afghanis from Edmonton. another Baha'i from Edmonton.
My goodness,
So
welcome.
please-
My good, this is a very interprovincial gathering we have.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, any
So,
comments so far about the Hindu perspective on levels of reality and the afterlife in particular? Anything else? You know, I appreciate the Belinda bringing attention to translations, right? That's another, you see, here's my problem with this kind of a dispute. If it's a dispute, if you're a skeptic, you can always say, well, how do you know you have the very correct, authentic version? So what I do is like try to find several versions and line them up and look for the meaning of them. Not so much the detailed alignment of words, but you're referring to another thing, the different numbering system. Oh, that's way beyond my pay grade. If you're going to start breaking up the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita differently, then you really can't compare, you know, the teachings very well. Most of them are pretty close, right? I've seen different versions of the Quran. They're only one verse off, you know, and such. Okay, Richard, please.
Just one more point, and that is with regard to the idea that you need a physical change of bodies in order for the concept of passing through many lives and being reincarnated spiritually. I think it's just an easy way of thinking to say it has to be physical, because that's in effect the same concept that Baha'u'llah taught with regard to you progress from level to level, understanding and awareness and ability to put things into practice. And why it has to be physical, I think is just a choice people made. But I don't see it as being necessary to accept the whole concept of reincarnation at all.
But see, if you think of reincarnation teachings as about rebirth, suddenly they look illuminating to me. If I can say rebirth instead of reincarnation and look at that as some sort of an observation or kind of an attempted guidance about spiritual growth, moral growth, elevated consciousness, right? So then suddenly it means something to me. So I try to, every time I see reincarnation, substitute rebirth and look at it again, right? And, you know, when people talk about, you know, people say things like, oh, I saw a new light. I was a different person after that experience. They're saying they were reborn, right? So that's a rebirth experience. So they jumped in their level of consciousness and awareness or sense of responsibility. And so we have to look at language in a very careful way. Literally, figuratively, abstract. Are we using metaphors that are familiar to us, like bread leavening or rafts across the water, right? Or embryos and things like that. So I think it's good to have several people looking at this. It's why we need discussion. You read something, you study it, you ponder it, and then you get in a group and look at it again. I have to believe reality is ultimately one. So somehow these deep interpretations have some high correlation. That's Harold's hypothesis. There must be a big correlation here, and I'm looking for it. And I don't want to jump to conclusions too quickly. Okay. There might be real differences between religions, but they may be more about social customs and rituals than about the description of reality and moral spiritual advancement. Those might be more universal. So that chart I've given you, the 4-level chart, is an attempt to look at the whole advancement idea, right? And what are the teachings about that? Not so much looking at the ritualistic differences, the theological doctrine differences. Okay, friends, anything else right now? I want to quickly look at Buddhism, and especially the Tibetan Book of the Dead, because that's kind of special, seems to me. And at the end, a little bit on Sikhism, and then open the discussion up again. Okay, so I'm looking at the middle of my third page. It says Buddhist Faith Introduction. To me, it seems like a big theme in Buddhism is compassion. Compassion even for yourself and the fact that you're suffering, compassion for others, wanting to advance sentient beings of all kinds, to bring about more understanding and overcoming pain and suffering. You know, down at the bottom or in the middle, I put sacred writing. There's a lot of Buddhist sacred writing. The earliest package includes the Dhammapada, the path of truth. That's almost like the basic level of Buddhist scripture. And then there were a lot of other Mahayana scriptures that came after that. Sukhavati Vyuha sutras are about the Pure Land and images of what seemed to be collective heaven for all of humanity. We'll look at some of those passages later. Buddhist concept of ultimate reality, I've already alluded to them some, but terms like Dharmakaya, Dharma Dhatu, you know, point to the absolute nature of reality. There's even terms like that translate eternal Buddha, the eternal Buddha, higher than the Buddha that came to the earth. That was the historical Buddha. So in a way, Buddhism has a lot of concepts to me about higher reality, lots of them, just like Hinduism does. Yet Buddhism has a practical emphasis on it's important to overcome suffering, your own and others. So that your concept shouldn't be a barrier to that. They should help you with that moral spiritual ascent or progress. Okay. You know, there's a concept of no soul in Buddhism. I consider this rather controversial. To me, the Buddhist writings talk about awareness, an inner agency of awareness, without which you wouldn't be able to make any progress. So that's either the soul or the inner observer or the focus of consciousness. Whatever it is, that's what needs to advance. That's what I think the Buddha is trying to educate, the inner observer. So to say there's no concept of soul in Buddhism, as some people say, I think is missing something, yet that's considered a major teaching. So here's Harold's interpretation of Anatman, the no soul doctrine. It means something like belief in the insubstantial nature of the self, insubstantial nature of the self.
Mm.
The need to accept its ephemeral, changing nature. Every phenomenon is conditioned by other things, including the self. I think that comes closer to what the Buddha was talking about. We shouldn't get too attached to our own understanding of our inner observer or our self. That is in process. That's in motion, just like the rest of the phenomena of the world, both physical and spiritual. In process. Okay, I'm on my second page. There's some other interesting terms in Buddhism. Sunyata, that's at the top of the fourth page. Sunyata means something like emptiness. But I think that's misleading. It means emptiness of abiding structure. So you're pointing to the fact that things evolve. Everything does. Everything's in a process. You know, Kathy is here. She's a Buddhist. She probably understands some of this stuff better than me. So she's going to chime in when we get to the discussion. I know. So sunyata is a very important spiritual concept in Mahayana Buddhism. Nirvana means extinguishing the flame of craving. Now, as I understand it, that happens to some degree in this world. So we have glimpses of nirvana here. You know what I think is utterly parallel? Jesus talking about the kingdom of heaven is in the midst of you. See, that's like saying you have a little bit of heaven right now. You'll have a lot more later. I think Buddha is in effect saying something very parallel. We have glimpses of nirvana here, and I'm going to improve the odds, but you will advance to be in a state of pure nirvana That's the goal of your advancement, to help others get there too. Wow, okay. I mentioned here the Bodhisattva. This is the Mahayana ideal, one who attains nirvana but chooses to return to the world of suffering or samsara to help everyone else. A highly moral position, highly laudable, the concept of the Bodhisattva. Now, the realm of hungry ghosts, that's in the middle of my 4th page. As I'm understanding it, there's some sections of Buddhism that talk about 6 afterlife realms. So I just want to look at those very quickly with you here. And they're mentioned at the bottom of page 4 as well. The 6 afterlife realms. Godlike with a small g would be the highest afterlife realm. You're godlike, then angel-like, then human-like, animal-like, ghost-like, and hell-like. So that's going down, descending levels of the afterlife. This is an English translation of something, in Pahlavi, or the language the Buddha taught in originally. And then Buddhist scriptures got translated into, Chinese scripts as well. But anyway, so 6 afterlife realms, in a descending order. Which one of those are you wanting to get to? And from which of those will you make advancement? The hungry ghost idea is pretty fascinating to me. And I think I see parallels with some native teachings.
I quickly wanted to chime in and say, actually, the human realm is the highest realm. It's higher than the God realm, which is very confusing, but it's because it's the only one you can reach nirvana from. Because when you're in the God realm, everything is good. So you're happy. So you have no need to practice or to be a good person because everything is really good. So if you get stuck in the God realm, you kind of burn through the merit you earned.
Okay, Kathy, I'm going to pull a Belinda on you. Please send me that source. So you've got a different arrangement. This one I said is something I thought I read. Now you got another source, and I hear what you're saying.
And I feel pretty confident in it because they say that you don't want to go to the God realm because you're not any help to anyone in the God realm. Actually, you want to go to the human realm. That's the one you can.
Fascinating. Okay. Anyway.
Rosy glasses realm.
Yeah, interesting. My notes are improving.
Yeah. Sounds like the marijuana realm.
No, I like the idea that, so this godlike, so that we would need another word in English to do justice to that, because godlike sounds higher than human, but that's only from a Western point of view, right? So you have I'd like to see your source. I'm not critiquing you. I'm just saying I haven't seen it put that way. Okay, I'm looking down 2/3 of the way on page 4, Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is like a quick summary. And again, people who have looked at this may have a different interpretation. This book had a title, something like Liberation Through Hearing in the Intermediate Stage. Intermediate. So this is Bardo. The idea that, you go from this life to another realm, but you're halfway in between. You're in the intermediate realm. I'm interpreting. Liberation through hearing in the intermediate stage. This book, written and hidden in the 8th century of the Common Era, discovered more publicly in the 14th century, a guide to enlightenment in the journey of rebirth, an opportunity to see the clear light of the Dharmakaya. Remember, the Dharmakaya is something like the body of truth. The clear light of the body of truth, or the highest realm of reality, the opportunity to see that. Okay, an account of 3 states. I'm just reading my notes. An account of 3 states or sets of choices. 3 choices or sets of choices. 1, the pain of seeing and talking with relatives unaware of one's presence, along with an opportunity to identify with the clear light. So I'm going to put this in my own words. Our consciousness sees that our body is dead and that people are fussing over our dead body. We can either identify with that little drama going on right around us, or choose to go higher toward the clear light. So if we stay stuck in looking at people fussing over our dead body, we're like a hungry ghost. So that's the first temptation. I'm interpreting. I know Kathy's going to say something else about this. Okay, imagine that that's one test. You can either hang around and watch people suffer over your dead body, or go on and make more progress. Here's another test. Number 2, confronting the contents of the mind in the form of peaceful and wrathful deities. So you have a bunch of horrible beings or beautiful beings, and a contest between them. Confronting the contents of the mind in the form of peaceful and wrathful deities, and identifying with one side or the other. Identifying with one side or the other, or just
Scary.
the contest. The third test, meeting the Lord of Death. That was that Yama figure. Meeting the Lord of Death for a detailed review of the past life, along with a weighing of good versus bad deeds, symbolized as white or black pebbles. How many black pebbles are there when you review your life? How many white pebbles are there? Do you have more white pebbles or more black pebbles as you review what happened in your life and your interaction with other beings? Followed by a fair judgment of some kind, and a new birth in a higher and appropriate realm. Oh my goodness. Anyway, you can't summarize a 250-page book in one paragraph, but I tried, based on some other summaries that I saw. But essentially, there's a series of tests and decisions, and in a sense, you're deciding to either get stuck at a certain level or go higher toward the clear light of Dharmakaya. We always want to go beyond, I think most of the scriptural teachings are saying, keep making progress. Okay. Quickly, let's look at some of on page 5, I've given some of the shorter Buddhist quotations regarding the afterlife, and let's look at them quickly. It seems to me that Buddha was a little bit critical of some of the teachings of his day, which were sort of rigidified Hindu teachings, right? And he wanted to give some new metaphors for what happens to us after death. And so, one set of teachings was about a candle is lit and it goes out here, but it's already lit other candles. And so the light that was you is now on other candles in other realms, something like that. Or another metaphor was your life has an impact like a mold, a wax mold. And when you disappear, your body disappears, your shaping power or your mold continues in other realms. You still have your shaping or influential power. So those are some of the little images that Buddha was using to talk about progress of the soul. Or, again, I use the word soul. The inner observer, the agent of consciousness, whatever. Okay, let's look at some of these quotes and stop and talk about Buddhism. And if we have any more time, we'll touch very quickly on Sikhism. And you'll see Sikhism has a lot of similarity to Hinduism, to Islam, and to Buddhism as well, because Sikhism is really concerned about the ego and attachment, just like Buddhism is. Kathy, can you read 1, 3, and 5? Those are short little one-liners from Buddhist scriptures. 1, 3, and 5 on page 5.
Sure. The man who does evil suffers in both worlds. The man who does good is happy in both worlds. Even ornamental royal chariots wear out. Even ornamental royal chariots wear out. So too the body reaches old age, but the virtue of the good grows not old. Meritorious deeds will receive the good person upon his arrival in the next world, as relatives welcome a dear one on his return.
Okay, all three of those quotes, it seems to me they're pointing to different worlds, the world we're in now and the world we want to graduate to. Wasn't that interesting saying a chariot wears out, so does the body, but the virtue of the good grows not old. That's eternal. The virtue of the good points to a sort of an eternal realm of some kind. And the meritorious deeds waiting for you in the next life, just like relatives welcoming you home. How beautiful is that? You see, that gives you motivation to perform meritorious deeds because they're going to meet you, like loving relatives. Other comments so far on what these might mean? Okay, number 7, I want to, oh, please, Richard. Yes, Richard.
This wasn't related to the scripture readings that you're talking about.
Something else, okay.
It seemed to be me when, I don't know if it's something I sort of heard in passing that I picked up, and understanding that when you pass on, you are either in a very positive spiritual state or a very negative down in the dump state. And what occurred to me, because of some of the other comments that people have made about seeing your life flash before your eyes, what I thought maybe was happening was you are becoming aware of all of the ways you've influenced everyone around you, I guess, including yourself, the reason you did things, how they impacted other people. And so instead of being kind of like a blind dummy that just roars through life, you all of a sudden you see, and that wouldn't, if you have empathy, very positive, powerful empathy, those themselves would, I think, have that kind of a positive or negative impact on you. So that, I guess in my mind, was a path to understanding the good and bad in your life and the outcome, the impact it would have on your spiritual reality.
It's a beautiful, lovely comment. Even in this one life, the older we get, the more we review what happened a long time ago. And we kind of reshape it and reinterpret it and look at it. And we have a chance to be compassionate with all those dumb mistakes that we made and sort of work them through. Imagine a glorious version of that same thing. You see it from a higher level entirely, everything you ever did and all the impacts. It looks like, the Tibetan Book of the Dead was saying that's exactly what's happened. It mentioned like a life review. You look at everything you ever did, all the interactions in terms of black and white pebbles, and you mount them up for a total reevaluation. Okay, yeah. So it looks like, a lot of this stuff it's like a higher version of things we already can observe in this life. Reviewing our experience is extremely important in making any kind of progress. And the older we get, the more we have to look back at and figure out and learn from. All right, there's a few more here. Number 7, I want to share and then pick on it myself. This is Buddha talking directly in the Dhammapada. Guard well your mind. You see, the reason I'm picking on this is like, the no soul thing. He says, guard well your mind. Who's going to guard your mind? There's something that can guard your mind. You get my drift. So Buddhism cannot have a no soul entirely. There's something that can guard your mind. Okay, I'm going to go on further.
It's confusing because it's like Buddha in nature. So I think what you would think of as soul, the Buddha calls Buddha nature. But I think
another big term. We should have been using that. I think it
works very well like that. Like that's the thing that you're accessing that brings you into nirvana.
Excellent.
So yeah, so it's the Buddha nature that does that. If that
guard well your mind. Uplift yourself from your lower self, even as an elephant draws himself out of a muddy swamp. So again, this is telling, we have something within us, Buddha nature, our higher nature can make improvements and control our lower nature. We have that capacity. Very interesting. Okay. Number 9, look how quick this is. Creatures are heir to their deeds. Heir, H-E-I-R. Creatures are heir to their deeds. Does that sound like as ye reap, so ye shall sow? You're heir to your deeds. Oh my, I've inherited all my deeds for good or ill. Oh my. And then up in this other realm, talking to the, the guy in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Yama, I'm really going to get a big, clear grip on all my deeds. Wow. And then look at Buddha, number 10. He's almost impatient. Since there are actually other worlds, he says, different rebirth realms, then one who holds the view that there is no other world is wrong. That's, I'm sure I'd like to see another translation of that, but this is Buddha getting a little bit upset that people think this is all there is. There's other realms. Okay.
You think he means it physical or spiritual?
I think he
Or
means
both.
spiritual. Well, we know there's lots of realms in this realm. Science picks them apart. Think of that chemical chart of the elements. How many different plant forms do we have? Animal forms. Oh my goodness, there are lots of forms and levels.
I'm
Just in
thinking
the
of just
physical. But now,
planet.
yeah. All right. One more quote, and this is, very few people in the West know about this. This scripture called the larger Sukyavati Vyuha. It means views of the afterlife, essentially is what that means, as I understand it. Kathy, can you read this and tell us what it might mean?
I'll do my best. Excuse me. And many kinds of rivers flow along in the, wait, is it number 11? Did you want
11,
number 10?
11.
11. And many kinds of rivers flow along in the Pure Land, and the sound with which issues from these great rivers is as pleasant as that of a musical instrument, consisting of hundreds of thousands of parts. Heavenly music. It is deep, commanding, touching the heart, delightful, and one never tires of hearing of it. So yeah, that sounds pretty heavenly to me. The Pure Land as the final, like parinirvana, like the final resting place for all beings.
I went to a Buddhist campus in Korea that was trying to make the campus look like this Pure Land. I was so stunned with it. It had these tranquil ponds, gardens. People had the discipline not to be too loud or raucous. Birds were tweeting. It just seemed like it was designing a physical image of the Pure Land. Oh, and they had streams too. They had natural and also sort of, designed streams that ran everywhere. So you would hear this little trickling sound along with birds and the beautiful gardens. And so someone was trying to interpret, images of the Pure Land. And the music thing really impresses me here, like sounds we've never heard of. What kind of an orchestra is that? And as to how you get there, there's many different kinds of Buddhism, but Pure Land Buddhism is sort of saying, if you can imagine the Pure Land and commit yourself to follow Amitabha, the one who designed the Pure Land, a Buddha, a celestial Buddha, then you'll get there. All you have to do is imagine for 10 seconds, not get distracted, and not think of, your lunch menu or taxes. Think of the Pure Land. So you develop a meditation technique visualizing the Pure Land, and that improves the odds that you make progress towards it. Okay.
Thinking of the music played and reminded me of I guess it was an idea that was put into a TV show or something where people are listening to very attractive music when they're in space, and it's drawing them to a destination which may or may not be a good place to be going. But it's sort of like a fish smelling something that is going to be very tasty further down in the water. And I'm wondering if it's a similar concept.
My
There's
goodness.
music that just draws you to it.
You know, I think the whole realm of the arts is fascinating. The interface between spiritual things and artistic things.
And that's mathematics too, right?
Oh, mathematics as well. Yeah. The eloquence of some mathematical symbols and the image of the other world, very, very lovely.
That's,
The
math, yeah.
the motivation for art too, is it for the glory of God, or is it for the elevation of all sentient beings? Is that the motivation? It sounds like that would be the best motivation for creating beauty or art in the world. So that's another interface between, say, art and religion. Other comments? Someone else had their hand up. Yeah, Belinda.
Yeah, in the West, I think we have a concept of the music of the spheres.
Yeah, music of the spheres.
Yeah.
Pythagoras came up with that. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
I know someone who felt they'd heard that once.
Heard the music of the spheres? When in the last session, if you're still here, week 6, we're going to read some of these reports of near-death experience that talk about colors you can't describe, sounds you cannot describe, music that's not like any other music. People are frustrated. This is from another realm. All we have is these clunky words for the physical world by which to describe that realm. Oh my goodness. Okay, friends, we're not going to have time for Sikhism, but let me tell you something quickly. I bet you Kathy's had some experience like this. You go to a conference, an interfaith conference, and somebody gives a talk, and the Buddhist and the Sikh are sitting right beside each other, nodding their head at exactly the same time. So remember I mentioned a Sikh concept called Haumi or no, what did I call it? I gave you another word on the first page. Oh, nuts. Where did it go? Manmukh. Manmukh is the Sikh description of what life is like. And it means impulse. It means grasping, egoistic, frustrated. So like when Buddha said all life is suffering, there's sort of a Sikh version of the same thing. And the way to get beyond this is to elevate the soul so that when you die from this realm, you go right up to Sahaj, which is the goal of life or spiritual release, also called Mukti, which is the same as moksha in the Hindu tradition. So chanting, prayers, reading scriptures, meditation, acts of service, egalitarian service, all of those are ways to make spiritual progress. But again, in the Sikh scriptures, the Guru Granth Sahib, you see things that look like the goal is to go right up, to have release, not to come back. That coming back would be seen as some kind of a failure. It can happen, and it does. They're warning you it does happen, but it's not something desirable. Anyway, that looks to me like what the Sikh scriptures are saying. We want to get beyond reincarnation. We want to get beyond samsara, as it's called in Hinduism and Buddhism. Okay, we don't have time to deal with Sikhism, but it's sort of like what we talked about before with Buddhism and Hinduism mixed with some Islamic elements, right?
Mhm.
There's some, well, let's look at one quote. Sorry, one quote. One quote from Sikhism. Yeah, here it is, page, the 6th page, number 2. After you depart from this life, God or Sat Nam, the ultimate realm, shall demand a reckoning of your deeds. Falsehood must be destroyed. Truth in the end shall prevail. But here's my favorite one, number 5. This is on the last page. The drop is in the ocean, and the ocean is in the drop. Who can understand this secret? And then it answers this question. He who knows the ways of the Lord gets to answer this question. It goes on. The one who created the world, he himself knows the meaning. He who meditates on the knowledge, capital K, attains the perfect state through liberation. So I think this is pointing to the direction of spiritual progress, gaining capital K knowledge of the one, right? Or Ik Ankar, the one supreme being. A lot of names for the divine. I love this Sat Nam thing. You know, it means the true name. So God cannot be named. So they're saying the true name is the name you can't name for the ultimate reality. But it also is a greeting, Sat Nam. They go like this, Sat Nam. I recognize ultimate reality in you. You and I are experiments of the divine. We happen to have met each other. It's a beautiful kind of greeting. Sat Nam. Okay, questions, comments, complaints? Anyone?
Just have one thing I'm curious about. Accustomed, and you obviously are to call it Sikhs, but I've heard a lot of people in the news recently calling them Sikhs,
I
including
think that's
the
more
people
correct.
that
I
are-
just can't make myself say that because it doesn't sound good. You're right, Kathy, he's right, isn't he?
Can I jump in? Yes.
Please,
Oh,
please.
I have Sikh relatives, and that is the correct pronunciation. But as you said, it doesn't sound right in our environment, does it? Yeah. No, that's the correct one.
And they're usually okay with either, but yeah, Sikh is more.
Okay. They're very forgiving. I've been saying Sikh a long time, and they haven't kicked me out yet. But you know, it's a beautiful idea. It means follower or seeker or learner. It's a beautiful idea. The Sikh faith, I mean, the faith for learners, lifelong learners. It's a very beautiful concept, very universal. All right, friends, anything else? What did you almost say a long time ago tonight? You know, I hope my method is working. We're comparing a whole bunch of very so-called different things. How do you do that? And keep on topic. So the chart is my method, for better or worse. I'm trying to look for how do the different faiths name those levels. The afterlife is sort of in the middle. That's what we're studying. It's lower than the ultimate realms and higher than the one we're in now. So the way they talk about that, the way they name it, the metaphors, the guidance about that should be comparable.
Yeah,
That's what I'm hoping for.
yeah, Harold, I think when we start looking at metaphors, we're into the realm of poetry as well. And metaphors, if they don't lead us into some kind of ridiculous literalism, can lead us into a realm of harmony.
You know, I wish I'd have known that when I was trying to study poetry. Way back in school. Why didn't someone say that? Oh my goodness. You know, because I heard Robert Bly, a poet, put it this way. He says, if one line of poetry grabs you, that's a success. Go to that one line. Why did it speak to you? So I was trying to always understand the whole poem. You know, of course I got frustrated, and I was being a little too literal back in those days. But now, under the influence of basking in the scriptures of different faiths, you see different meanings, right?
Yeah.
It does point to higher realms. You can start to see.
Got a question?
Mathematics does that too. So does science, I believe. And all the faiths are talking about realms and making progress through them. Please, Richard.
Just a quick question, and that is, where would you put in your levels purgatory, which the Catholics have
Well,
a
that's
level?
still, it's up in the afterlife realm. That afterlife realm has a long way up and a long way down.
It's sort of a seven. Okay.
It's like Kathy's going to send us the new 6 levels of hell, a Buddhist version of them. You see, no, purgatory and hell are in the afterlife realm. Those are other sub realms.
Oh, be cautious before you shut off this program.
Yeah.
They're in the chat and it'll disappear the moment. So if you don't copy them out and paste them somewhere else, they're going to go poof. And your 6 levels are going to be gone.
Oh, it's okay. No. I was just letting folks know about the 6 levels, but I'll find the information online and I'll email it to you.
Oh, okay.
Way to go.
Yeah, I just want to see your list. I'm probably going to like it better than the
To the
one I've
chat,
been using. And
Well, and I find it helpful because I was just saying you can understand them as psychological levels, like things we're working on in ourself. So there's that understanding, but then there's also the idea of them being like actual realms. But it's usually understood that the human realm is the best because that's where you're influencing.
psychological realms, spiritual realms kind of means the same thing. Some people are more comfortable calling it psychological. Right. But on the other hand, when you say spiritual realm, it almost sounds like that's not only inside you, it also is somehow outside of us as well. Right. It's metaphysical. It might be bigger than psychological. Okay. Thank
Take
you.
the ocean. That's a good metaphor.
Are you getting into the micro level where they're talking now that everything is connected? Even if there's no
Interconnected.
physical connection? You start getting into the lowest level of physics. So that's turning the spiritual into physical reality. They're coming together and you can't do anything about it.
Gordon, I designed a course called Spirituality, Religion, and Science. And we're going to try to look at timelines for the whole history of science, the whole history of religion, and the whole history of spiritual traditions. And try
Boy,
to,
is that ever ambitious.
completely ambitious. And
Go
so
for it. I'd love to
How
do
big is
that.
your library, Harold? We just see a little bit of it. To write these things that you write, do you live in like the library from Beauty and the Beast, where it's like everything?
I have a lot of books, but you've heard of Wikipedia too, haven't you? You see, or any other, you can get little snapshots. I'm always looking for summaries, to comparative summaries of things. So that's a lot of what I do. And you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to have a map for exploring. That's what I try to create. And other people bring to the table all kinds of things that they've learned. So it makes for interest. But yeah, what Gordon said reminded me, from within science, you get to these very spiritual sounding things having to do with energy and consciousness, right? To me, it's utterly parallel to issues going on in spirituality and in religion. And there are people who know more than one field, right? So they're aware of that. They go, oh, I'm getting some ideas for my physics experiment because of my understanding of spiritual literature, right? Or a new death experience or something like that. Okay, friends, we went over time, but that's what happens when you're having fun.
Mhm.
All right,
Wonderful.
I'll see you in a month, and we're going to look at the Chinese traditions next time. Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism.
Kathy's going to be sending out all the
Yes, I'll send,
documentation.
I'll send all the recordings. So I'll send the recording from this and I'll send the link for the next one and then
The links and the handouts too. Yeah.
handouts. So yeah, thank you so much, Harold. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Harold.
you. All right. Take
Great
care.
as
Good night.
usual.
Thank
Okay,
you.
nice to see
Bye.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Stay safe, stay